Well, we've got our character and our textures in the scene here. We've hooked up the idle animation in the animator. I think our next task is to go ahead and bring in the other animation clips. So I'm going to open up the object, the character object here, and go down to the bottom, and here are our animation clips. Here's the idle that we've already put in. Let's now bring in the run. So let's just grab this and drag it in, and there it is. Now what we need to do is figure out how to transition from the idle to the run. We can make our transitions here in the animator by right-clicking on a clip and choosing Make Transition and then dragging over and then clicking on another clip. And I'll do the same with the run, Make Transition and drag down here. So now we have transitions going from the idle to the run and from the run to the idle. Now we can trigger these in a lot of different ways, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to create a parameter and I'm going to use an integer. So over here you've got layers and you've got parameters. So if you go to parameter and click on the little plus right here, that will give you the menu where you can choose an integer. So I'll click that and here we go. Now I'm going to call this, well, since it's an animation parameter, let's call it animation parameter. There we go. So this particular integer parameter we're going to refer to in our script, in our character controller script. And we just need to now define what happens at 0 or 1 or 2 or whatever. So at integer 0, we can say that you'll transfer back to the idle. So here, let me scroll down here, and under conditions, let me open this up a bit. So under conditions, we can say that when the animation parameter equals 0, the character will transition back to the idle. All right, so we can now choose the other transition here, and we can click on the plus to create another transition, another condition, I should say, and say that when the animation parameter is equal to 1, then we'll transition to the run. Okay, so in the script, we're going to be telling Unity what animation clip to transition to by changing this parameter from 0 to 1. All right, so now let's bring in our jump script here, or our jump clip. I'm going to move over here and bring this in. So here's our jump. So now let's think about this. If we want to transition from the run to the jump, that transition should be a new parameter, right? We've already used 0 and 1 here. To go to the jump, we could create a condition where animation parameter equals 2, right? And then to go back from the jump to the run, that we've already established that the run is 1, right? Where the animation parameter is 1. So let's say that condition going from the jump to the run is 1, right? So here we have going from the idle to the run, we have 1, and going from the jump to the run, we have 1. So to go to the idle is 0, to go to the run is 1, and to go to the jump is 2. Now we can, of course, as I said, have many animation clips, and this animator window can look like a spider web if you have a whole lot of animation clips to work with. All right, so now we have transitions from the idle to the run, from the run to the jump. We need to be able to jump directly from the idle as well. If we're just standing there, we want to be able to jump up. So from the idle to the jump, we've established that the jump is 2, so I'll create a condition where the animation parameter equals 2 here, and we've established that the idle is 0, so we go back to the idle and that transition. We create a condition where the animation parameter equals 0. There we go. All right, so now we have transitions going to and from all of our clips. But there's not much we can do with it at this point in time because we have no way to trigger them. To be able to trigger them, we're going to need a script. So let's go back here, and I'm going to go collapse this back down. And to create a script, we just need to right-click in the Assets window, go to Create, and create a C# script. And for this, we could call it just Player. So there we go. Now, if I double-click this, Unity will search for MonoDevelop and open that up so that we can edit our script. And here it is. Okay, so this is the default code that we get whenever we create a new script. This up here is referring to particular libraries that this script is going to be using. This is our public class. This name right here needs to be the exact same as the name of the script here. So you can get errors if you accidentally change those somehow. The start function happens one time at the beginning of the game, and the update function happens on every frame. So it's cycling through this function on every frame of the game. So the first thing we need to do is figure out how to connect this script with both our character controller and our animator controller, because these are where we're going to control the character. We're going to control the movement of the character around our scene with the character controller, and we're going to trigger the animations with the animation controller. So these are important things to be able to connect to. So first of all, what we need to do is create a couple of new variables. One is going to be the character controller. It's going to be a private variable because it only needs to be seen within this script. And we'll call the name of this variable controller. The next thing we need is a variable for our animator controller. And we also want a private variable for that. And we'll have this variable be of type animator, and we'll call it anim. So these two variables will allow us to connect to the character controller and the animator controller. But we need to initialize them when the game first begins. So if we come down here, under the start function, we can say we want to use the controller variable to get the component of the character controller here. And we want to do the same thing for the animator controller. So we'll use that variable to get the game object that is the component that we want here. And we want to get the animator. And there we go. So these two lines will go and find and connect with our character controller and our animator controller. So now that we have our controllers set up, let's go ahead and test out our animation parameters and see if they work for us. To do that, I'm going to come down to the update function down here, and I want to say that if I press the up arrow, the run animation should trigger, should turn on. So what I'm going to say is if the input for a key happens to be the up arrow, then what I want to do is use that animator controller variable, and I want to set the integer of that animation parameter to 1. There we go, and save that. So once again, if we get an input from the up arrow, then change the animation parameter in the animator controller to 1. And we've already defined that 1 will trigger the run. So let's see if this works. I'm going to go back to Unity, and I'm going to need to take this player script and drag it over here onto my character. And then if we take a look at it, if we click on it, we can see that that player script is now a component down here in our inspector. All right, we've got a warning here. It says that the character controller here isn't being used, and that's true. We're not using it yet, and that's fine. So let's just hit play and see what happens. So we have our idle going, and if we hit the up arrow, you can see he runs. Now if I take my finger off the up arrow, he continues to run because there's no way for him to get back to the idle using the animation parameter of 0. So let's turn off the game here. And let's go back to our script. And now what we need to do is just tell Unity that when the up arrow isn't being pushed, we want to go back to the idle pose. So if our input key is up, else, we can say that the anim set integer should be animation parameter of 0. And there we go. So now what we're saying is if the input key is pushed and it's the up key, then transition to the run. Else, if nothing is happening, then go back to the idle. So let's save that. Go back to Unity. Let's hit play. And so we push the up arrow and he runs. And we lift up off the up arrow, and he stops. All right, so we have our run and our idle cycles working out. That's good. In the next video, we'll work on connecting the jump animation and moving the character around. See you then.